Hello humans, today I want to talk about this guy right here. This is the crkt biwa. It's a knife that I've had for almost 2 years now. It's a nice little knife from crkt. It has slightly over 3 inches of blade length. On their site they advertise it as 3.2, which translates to pretty well 3 inches of cutting edge. Very, very simple design, as you can see, which means that for a lot of different hand shapes, it's quite ergonomic, even if your hand doesn't really fit on there. It's a comfortable 3-finger grip. I mean, I don't really think there's anybody who's going to be doing this in a 2-finger grip, but it's fairly comfortable, no matter how many fingers you have on there. It has truly exceptional jimping. You can see at the top that it makes like these complete U's. It's not just like cutouts or whatever, which means the top is borderline sharp, which means your thumb is actually very well retained in there. The jimping on the bottom is equal, as good in the steel, but because of the way that the G10 handles are set up, you can see the orange liner and the multicolored G10 actual scale don't have the same jimping, which means that there is far less actual sort of grip going on down there. Bayonet grind, hollow grind too, actually. So for its fairly slim, like it's not a very tall blade, but for its fairly slim height, it is very, very slicey. In my experiences with it, it hasn't proven to be very, like there hasn't been significant shouldering in that space, which is good, but it is still something that is worth noting, and especially just because it's not a very tall blade to reach its maximum slicing potential. So you're getting to its full thickness of basically 100 thousandths. So it's definitely a slimmer blade, but you're reaching its full thickness of 100 thousandths in, so there's also a flat that I'm ignoring in order to do it this way, but just a hair over half an inch. 583 thousandths. So just over half an inch. Which is not a lot of space, in truth. But despite that, it does have fairly good slicing performance. This is designed to be sort of a bird and trout knife, which means, you know, small game, taking out squirrels or whatever. And for that, it does work fairly well. I'm not a huge hunter, nor am I a very large fisherman, but I have used this to do small amounts of animal prep, and it does work fairly well for that. It has a very, very pokey tip. As you can see, the geometry is very focused on poking things, which means that it's easy enough to get into animals to gut them, or so on and so forth, which is an absolute positive. But on the flip side, it doesn't really have very much that retains your hand in place. Like, there's no type of guard, there's no thumb ramp, there's only the jimping, which does provide a fair amount of traction, but if you're poking with any significant level of force, especially for an animal that is bigger than a squirrel, maybe a rabbit, with thicker skin in particular, you're at fairly significant risk of sliding your lead finger onto the blade and cutting yourself, which is a pretty big detriment to this knife. But because I'm not a hunter, this mostly exists in sort of an EDC capacity for me, and to that end, I actually really like it. It's quite small. As you can see, the sheath, thermomolded plastic sheath. It has good retention. It's a little rattly, but it's really not too bad. And it does come with a drainage hole, which is absolutely a huge plus. And it comes with this sort of attachment belt loop thing. Now, depending on the type of belt you have, my belt, I actually can't just slide this on. I have to take it off and put it back on every time I want to put my belt. I want to put it on, which I find a little bit annoying. But for most people, it's as simple as just sliding your belt through there and then putting it. I like to carry this in a true Scout's carry on my back, run my knuckles along the back of my belt, and it feeds in. Fairly nice and simple. And to that end, this belt attachment is quite nice in two regards. One, you can see you can offset it. So the knife actually sits slightly higher than my belt, which when I'm sitting and stuff like that just makes it more comfortable. Or you can drop it way below your belt, or again, way higher, way lower kind of a deal, just by changing how it's mounted because of that offset, because it's not attached top and bottom of the sheath, it's attached on one side only. You can have it like this. You can flip it around, have it sit literally an inch or two below your belt line. You can have it sit an inch or two above your belt line, pretty much anything you want. Other thing that this sheath is good for is for neck carry. If you take the belt attachment off entirely and run your cord through here, it sits nicely on the neck, and it is a very lightweight knife. Like, there's not much to this, and what there is quite lightweight, which makes it fairly easy to carry, and if you are in the mood to carry a fixed blade, it does go fairly unnoticed. Now, I am of the opinion that the lanyard loop here is too small. It doesn't quite fit comfortably, and I can't grip the knife properly with it on. As you can see, I'm kind of forced to hold like this, which is quite uncomfortable. But it is a simple paracord loop, so you can get a bigger one without too much difficulty. And it does make up for that not fitting super nicely, because you can just, I gotta remember how I do this. It's over like this, and then just over your hand. And that actually does quite a bit. Just looping it over your hand like this does quite a bit to prevent it from your hand being even able to slide up, right? Without your thumb in, you are still at slightly higher risk, but you can move the knot to where, like, if you slide the knot down just a hair, then you can't slide up onto the blade, which is quite useful. And if you're going to use this for significant puncturing tasks, I would recommend doing that. The other option for preventing yourself from sliding up, especially if you're cutting into fairly easy items, I cut into a lot of feed bags, and what I find works quite well for stabbing into feed bags, because they're not the toughest thing in the world, but they have caught knives before and been a little bit tougher than you'd expect. I just palm it. I put the edge of the blade in the palm of my hand and make my cuts kind of like this. Poke, slice, and to that end it works quite well. Blade steel on this particular model is HCR13 MOV, which is fine. I mean, it's not the most premium steel in the world, but this is comfortably a budget knife, and honestly, it seems to be heat treated well enough that I don't mind that. Like, it does hold up fairly well for what it is. All told, it's a very, very simple knife, but it is comfortable to use. It is easy enough to use. It's not going to be good for any harder tasks like cutting wood or even many camp tasks. It does work fairly well in food prep, but it's not amazing. What this really excels at is just being a small, easy to carry, everyday carry fixed blade. You can get clips that'll allow you to pocket carry this, and my personal preference for pocket carry would actually be that it only have these loops on one side, but I can understand the value of having it on both for belt carry, and it's not too wide, like even compared to something along the lines. So this is the Civivi Chevalier. As you can see, it's not significantly wider than the Civivi Chevalier is. Compared to something more along the lines of like a Spyderco Para 3, it's pretty similar in height to a Spyderco Para 3 in the sheath. So in the pocket, it's not as bad as you would expect it to be, although it is wider than I think is strictly necessary. Let's do some size comparisons real quick. Here it is next to the Wee Banter and the Civivi Chevalier. So for a fixed blade, this is actually a fairly small knife. Most fixed blades tend to be larger than folding knives are, and I mean, there's good reasons for that, right? You can get a lot more strength, which means that you can take advantage of having a bigger size with a fixed blade versus a folder. But there is absolutely space for these smaller folding knives. I do think that there is a fairly significant amount of value in a smaller folding knife like this, so it isn't worth dismissing because of its smaller size. Just my 2 cents, but there you go. And then we're gonna have it up against the Buck 110. And a Zippo. So as you can see, it is significantly smaller than the Buck 110. And I mean, a lot of that has to do with how slim it is, right? It is not a very thick, substantial knife, and it doesn't need to be a very thick, substantial knife. Not thick, but beefy knife. And we're going to see this again in how slim it is. It is slimmer than the Zippo is, right? Which is not something you see all the time on folding knives. And I mean, it's almost exactly half the thickness of the Buck 110. So, it is a smaller knife. I do absolutely think that it has a use, and I've had quite a bit of success with it. I find it easy to use. It slays Amazon packaging like you would not believe, which is definitely to its benefit. It is fairly comfortable. There is a risk, again, if you're doing a lot of poking tasks or stuff like that, of running your finger up the blade, and that is absolutely something worth noting. If you're going to be using this for more intense stuff, I would very strongly recommend getting that knot to where you need it so that you can't slide up onto the blade, because you can absolutely do a number on your fingers with it. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much more to say. I absolutely think it is a recommendable knife. It is a comfortable knife, but it is a knife that if you don't see a use for it as soon as you see it, you will not have a use for it. It is very much you get what you get. There's no real surprises here. Stay safe and have fun out there. Peace.